This afternoon, I get to speak with creator of Bible Cinema Roadshow and Patterns of Evidence Films, Timothy Mahoney, about the latest film coming out that he is helping distribute called God of Heaven and Earth. Timothy Mahoney, how are you today?
Good, good. And it's the full name's Timothy Mahoney. So
Mahoney, I'm sorry, Mahoney. You
that's
know,
okay. But
now I got to make a
there's
tie-in
there's
to Police Academy, and then yeah,
yeah, that's right, right. Well, there's the football player Mahomes.
yes.
Sometimes people confuse my name with his name, but yeah, thanks for having me. And we're excited about this new film called God of Heaven and Earth. It's going to be in theaters on November 5th and 6th. And what's fascinating about this, if anybody loves astronomy or loves the sky and loves, is curious about the Bible and how it interrelates, there is a mystery that we are unveiling and kind of digging into with how the Star of Bethlehem could be tracked to the time of the birth of Christ. And that's one part of this amazing film.
Well, the film is a great documentary, and it's specifically designed for evangelical Protestant Christians. I'm going to ask the question for Catholics and Orthodox Christians in this regard. Why did Rick Larson, who is the presenter, not look into the Church Fathers and the First Ecumenical Council of Nicaea, where they used astronomy to backdate Easter all the way to the 14th of Nisan, and use astronomy in order to backdate all of this stuff ahead of time 1700 years ago, and go on this giant journey of his own without even researching what the early church said?
Well, there's a disconnect, I think, between these two different groups. Probably that's why they call them Protestants, because they're protesting against the church. But you raise a very good question, and it's a question that you should ask. We should ask, Mr. Larson about. But he decided to go on his own journey. I think oftentimes what you'll find with a scientist or an investigator is they don't go down necessarily someone else's trail. And there's a reason for that, is because if that person has made assumptions or different, have come to conclusions that they might have missed something. So what he did is he worked with a software that actually was tracking the orbits of stars and planets. So he tried something new, and he went back to that software. Then he looked at the Bible. He went and looked at the New Testament, and so in between that gap is the time period that you're talking about with the early church fathers, when they came to some conclusions as well. But I would probably say that that's the reason why. And I've actually seen it where we've had in my earlier films where somebody had come up with an idea and they had established it, and then it had kind of gotten ironed into the thinking of everybody. But if you go back to the original place, you go, well, did you read the instructions completely? Well, maybe this part really should be over here, and then you come up with a whole new understanding. So, but that's the fun of it, right? That's part of the investigative process, part of the process of being able to have a dialogue and to understand this.
And I'm not picking on Mr. Larson for going to the extent that he did. It's just that it's interesting. 1700 years ago, we had come to a very similar conclusion with the naked eye, and the astronomy that was used then, and then the notion that astronomy was almost heretical in the evangelical view, not realizing that astronomy is what's been used to date various holidays within Christendom.
Yeah, well, I'm fascinated by Isaac Newton. And some of the things that, I guess my understanding is that Isaac Newton actually wrote more about the Bible than he did about, science. And at some time, I want to pursue a film on Isaac Newton's life.
That would actually be quite fascinating, because I don't think there's enough of that beyond his scientific research.
Yeah, I think it would be. And I've got to, figure out where we would dig up all that information, but I'm hoping that they've kept good records of it. But back to this movie coming out November 5th and 6th, God of Heaven and Earth. There, as you know, Robert, there's two, focuses on this film. One is the birth of Christ, and then, which is, we've talked about, which is using astronomy to look at, well, how in the world did this star stay where it was so that people could see where they were going, and direct them. If this story is true, which we believe that it is, how did it happen? And that's one part of the story. And the film actually points then to this Christ that's coming for a purpose. And that's the second part of this investigation, which is that Christ came to die. And can we find, physical evidence of that? And that's the second part of his investigation, which I found very well to go, well, who would ever think of that? How we would look for evidence for that.
Right. It's interesting, the steps that people will take, and especially because of what's already been established in the Holy Land. One of my favorite things that I learned when I was visiting Jerusalem was that the Church of St. Peter is built on top of Caiaphas's house.
Oh, you really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
When they tore down Caiaphas's house, they built the Church of St. Peter right above it.
Yeah, and if you would have told Caiaphas that someday the church that you're trying to, you're opposing, is going to have, going to be on top of your home, I wonder what he would have thought about that.
The irony is not lost on us Middle Eastern Christians, and we have very much of that type of sense of humor. So it makes sense for us to build the foundation of the church, for St. Peter right above his home.
Yeah. It does. There's a lot of humor about things that happen. I think there's also, I'm trying to think, in England or somewhere where there was a famous atheist that the Bible Society now has his home. So I can't remember which one it was, but yes, those ironies are great to, when you know what they are. They're great. They're great fun.
With this movie that you're working on, God of Heaven and Earth, you have a 2-day release for this. Are you looking to expand to more theaters or a longer run, or was the goal just to get the first 2 days out and then build upon that?
The goal is always to have a longer run, and that's why we're with Iconic Releasing, so we can expand the run. It's in 650 theaters right now, and if people go to godofheavenandearth.com, they can see where the theater is. It'll target them, or they can put their zip code in. One of the things I'd like to share, this came to me yesterday. We call it Bible Cinema Roadshow, and that came about because in 2002 I was in Egypt, and I was in Cairo. I'd been in Egypt for about 3.5 weeks. I was exhausted. It was a scary time because it was just after 9/11, and I had planned to go into Egypt, but then I didn't know that was going to happen. And so 6 months later, here I am filming, not really sure how safe it was, and I'm investigating the story of the Exodus. And if we think about the story of the Exodus, there's an important event that happens in the story of the Exodus, and that event is the plagues. And the 10th plague is the death of the firstborn. And the Israelites were to take a lamb, and a lamb, not just any old lamb, but a lamb that didn't have any blemishes, and they were to sacrifice that lamb and put the blood of that lamb over their doorposts. And it was the Passover meal. And what's very interesting is that the connection between the Passover meal and the fact that this lamb covered and protected these people who were going to follow God, was it 1,500 years later comes Christ as a Passover lamb again. And that's what this film is about. And as people of faith, one of the things that I've wanted to, I told you about this, being in Cairo. I had this prayer time in a hotel at the end of this, and the thought came to me as I was praying. Roadshow was really strong. Roadshow, and for 20 plus years, I've carried that word with me. Okay, what does that mean? And always, when you have a thought or something that comes in your heart, you have to say, well, was that for a purpose, and do I need to not forget it? I'm praying about it, and I tried about 4 or 5 times to have a roadshow event in different communities, where I would bring movies in that testify to God acting in history. That's what our films are doing, that God is acting. And so this, when I was approached about putting movies in theaters, it came to me, well, why don't we just have this Bible? And then I came up with Cinema Roadshow. So that's how this was birthed. But Robert, what this is for is I'm creating, like this film, God of Heaven and Earth, is an opportunity for people in their community, if they care about the Bible, if they are a Bible champion, and they want to have a public confession or a public identification of God's word being true, we're bringing that opportunity to your listeners. They can come to this film. They can bring family and friends, their neighbor, the guy at work, whoever it might be, to a movie theater. Very safe place to go, get some popcorn, and enjoy an opportunity to see, and hear about spiritual things in a public setting. And that's why I think this is such a great ongoing thing that we're going to be doing, hopefully bringing more and more films. We've got quite a few of them slated, but they're opportunities. We're really helping, your listeners take on the role of just being a friend, and also being a person that is a Bible champion, to say, look at what the Bible has written and hear how we can see it unfolding both in the astronomy and in seismic, geology, and in other ways. And God can use that to open people's hearts to faith.
So your roadshow is essentially an updated version of the tent revivals that would also travel around with the carnivals.
Absolutely. It's funny you'd say that, but I think so, because it's where people are, right? And you go where people are. And I was thinking about the Apostle Paul. I mean, if you ever see where he was speaking in these amphitheaters, for a long time, I think it's how we're created. We're created to be together. We're created to experience and have these experiences of events, and events are important. And I had worked at one time with the Billy Graham Association, and Billy Graham went to stadiums all across the world and would have, these Billy Graham crusades where he would share the gospel. Well, that's what we're doing. We're sharing, God's word in a cinematic way, which is a very powerful tool.
You're also not doing one of those faith-based films where, the story is just telling a story, and then there's the biblical message, and then there's a conversion, and that's it. You're opening dialogue with this film and allowing people to have a conversation.
Yeah, and that I really appreciate the dialogue, because I think people need the process of sort of absorbing it, and some of that other activity of sharing deeper about faith might be really on a one-to-one basis with people that you would bring. But right now, these films that we're showing are really, there's a term that has been used, apologetic, meaning it's just sort of laying out the reasons for faith and the reasons to believe. It does a couple of things. One of them, it encourages people that have faith that there's even more patterns of evidence, as it were, of their faith. And number two, the Holy Spirit can use little instances within these movies that are going to basically say, it's true. I had a businessman one time, I was showing him a book of some of this evidence for the Exodus, and at a dinner, and afterwards, he said, if this is true, it changes everything. And you start to realize that, the Holy Spirit can use these events to bring people to a place where they say, it's true. And then it changes everything. I need to change. I need to do something here.
Well, one of the best evangelizers I ever saw was a man just standing on the street corner carrying a little cross, waving at everybody. And, he wasn't screaming. He wasn't standing. He was just carrying a little cross and just waving to everybody as they drove by. And I thought he was probably one of the best evangelists I'd ever come across. So, this is a different type of evangelism. It's not a mega church, concert type event. This is a spiritual event using astronomy, one of the earliest sciences, to depict the life of Christ and where the Star of Bethlehem came from. So I'm fascinated with how you delivered this, and I'm pleased with the final result of the documentary itself. Have you been working with churches and, interdenominations to get the message out even more?
I'm just starting. I'm going to start to have people actually call, and when we get a theater in an area, we're going to be calling and just saying to the pastor or to the priest or whoever, hey, we're in the area. Would you be interested in championing the Bible and letting people know that this film is here? This film is here for your community. If you've been to movies like right now at this time, you're going to see a lot of occult, a lot of evil movies that are in the theater, right? And these theaters are filled with this, and this is entertainment for people. Well, what better films to have than films that are showing evidence for the Bible? So it's taken millions of dollars to make these films, literally tens of millions of dollars to make these films, and they're underseen. And so we are making it available. We've talked to the theaters, we can get them into your area. And now what we're saying, we're helping you. This is the tool that you can use to bring your friends to. And it'll be an entertaining time. They're cinematically beautiful. They're engaging. I think they're fair-minded. They're non-declarative. But there's power because the patterns and the evidences are there that you can, have a discussion afterwards. These films will lead to a deeper conversation that you can have. And, it might not be the thing that just pushes them over, but it might be pushing them closer to coming to faith.
It's interesting you mentioned the occult style films, especially now in October. There was a film that recently came out called The Nun 2 about a demon-possessed nun. And that came out on the Virgin Mary's birthday. So the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary, I'm like, that's not a coincidence to release this movie on that day. So, right. It's good to see that just following All Saints Day is when your film, God of Heaven and Earth, is being released.
Yeah, I hadn't thought. Yeah, you're exactly right. There are things that are happening. Seasons are important. Dates are important. History is important. And what these films are telling us is that God acts in time and space. There are particular times when he is determined to do certain things. And even in your own life. So you've got people who are watching your show right now, watching us right now. They're not there by accident. There's something that I've come to realize is that we exist because we were invited to exist. We were invited to exist in God's, and so we're not here by an accident. If someone's listening and thinking, oh, what's my purpose or whatever, you were created for a purpose. And I think what it's important for us is to understand what that is, because all of us, it says there's coming a time when all of us will stand before our Creator. And so we need to be faithful. We need to ask, well, if you created me, what did you create me for? I think if I ask you, Robert, I think it's to worship and to to honor the God who created us. And so a lot of people don't know that message. They don't understand that. And so these films have been produced. I think they've been inspired to be made for this time, so that people who have no religious training, that have grown up in a family that has nothing, or there may be prodigals or whatever, this is the time you bring people like that to a movie, because they'll willingly possibly go with you to a movie, and buy their ticket if you need to. Invite friends, buy a half a dozen tickets and invite people to see God of Heaven and Earth. And have you seen the movie, Robert?
I have, and that's why I'm pleased with the development of the film.
Yeah, well, I think that it would be money well spent, and invite people, and I believe you're going to have a very good conversation afterwards, because you're going to be opening up, a really powerful conversation. And if you have, let's say you have teens, and I think if you have teens and they're going to go off to college, they are going to be hearing a lot of stuff that's not Bible centric. They're going to be hearing things absolutely opposed to the Bible, depending on what college they go to. So it's very important to ground your children, your teenagers, in information that actually has an answer, an alternative, and a very good one to some of the things that they might be told when they go off to university or to college.
With that being said, there are more studios popping up creating Christian content that's actually enjoyable, like what you guys have done with God of Heaven and Earth in this documentary, what Angel Studios has done with The Chosen, and so on and so forth that's coming out. Why did it take so long for Christian creators and filmmakers to finally get something that's entertaining and informative out to the public?
Well, I think that's a great question. Part of it is you have to be an artistic person. I think that cinema is still an artistic endeavor, like being a singer. And you have to possibly have a broader understanding of the way the world is in order for you to make films that seem to be normal. I mean, there are subcultures within faith, and those subcultures, people possibly can make a film based upon a missional approach as opposed to a craft approach. So the craft of filmmaking, which is storytelling, with cinematography, with good acting, with a good storyline, with a structure, a story structure that makes a lot of sense and is entertaining and engaging. If one of my favorite films when I was growing up was Chariots of Fire. And it was a very interesting film because it was so well done. David Putnam made that film. He was the producer, and they had an idea for a story. And now he wasn't. He was half Jewish, half Christian. I think his father was Jewish, his mother was Anglican or something, and he was this hybrid. But he had the ability with his team to tell a story that was very powerful, and it has to do with subtext and text. And so if you can tell a story with subtext, which means you don't say the words, it's what you see, and then you know when to say them, as opposed to basically not professionally being able to have the heart of the story and the flow of the story within the heart of the story, within the characters, so that you understand their motivation and you understand where they're coming from. And that's still a very there's not everybody can do that, but there are more and more people that are striving for that. I think about when doctors say they're practicing medicine. Well, you go, why would you say practicing? Well, because there's so much to learn, right? I feel the same way. I feel like I'm practicing filmmaking, and I've worked on close to about 10 features, and I can still say I'm practicing. I'm still working at trying to get it right. And I think that more and more, we need more and more people that have faith to basically practice telling stories through cinema and through the arts. And it's this weave of also getting, the weave is who's in front of the camera, how well can they perform, and who's written the storyline, how somewhat mature are the people who make films, so they know what they're doing with the tool, and so that they can be artistic about it. So anyway, I think the reason why is that probably there's been a intentional sense of we need to become better at this, and that takes wisdom. It takes people who actually are creative and talented, and it takes time. It takes some money too. So those are some of the reasons.
Tim, you have worked primarily as an executive producer and director on other projects, yet for God of Heaven and Earth, you are working as the distributor. What attracted to you to be a part of this project that you didn't have a direct hand in?
In this particular case, I felt that the time of this film was good. I was thinking about coming out with a film about the birth of Christ and started looking at that last fall. But other projects came in, and so that got put on hold. Different angles of looking at it. But I knew about this film that Rick Larson, who was a college professor, he's retired now, professor in law, and he was a copyright attorney. I knew of the work that he had done because he had worked on a film called The Star of Bethlehem, and this is a remake and a hybrid of that and another film that he has. And so I thought that the timing of this was very, very good for this time. We talked about when things happen. And right now, as we're preparing for the Advent season and we're preparing for the birth of Christ, this film is a great film. So godofheavenandearth.com, godofheavenandearth.com, November 5th and 6th. This is a good time to set your thoughts and your heart towards what's coming, in the Advent season.
Now, what dialogue would you like to open between the high churches and the low churches? So between Catholic and Pentecostal, Orthodox and Baptist, Anglican and Methodist. What dialogue with this docuseries or documentary would you like to open between the high churches and the low churches?
Well, I think that oftentimes there are many ways to have us divided. There's this one song back in the 70s, "They will know we are Christians by our love," And so what does that mean? And I think that love is kind, love is patient, love is, we know what these fruits of love are. But there are certain things that some of the churches have decided are culturally, there's certain things happening in the culture that some churches are opening the doors to, whether it's marriage or the gay question, transgender, all those different things. And then there's, well, what does the Bible say? And so what I think is we have to look and say, well, what is the Bible telling us about what we should believe? As the culture, the early Christians, in Rome, they were dealing with the Roman culture. There's other Christians throughout the centuries are dealing with these different cultures. And yet the Bible, if we think about the early church, and then it grew into the Catholic Church, and then it grew, there's these different iterations that have come. And then when Luther comes along, then there's a split. And I think as a person who loves history and interests in history, it's interesting because some of us say, hey, those are our people. And then we go, oh, I identify with this person or this person. And you realize kind of the culture that those people were facing, I mean, you think about the Puritans as an example. I mean, they wanted to move away from, I don't know the whole Puritan story, by the way, so I should be careful, but pretty much the world was sinful and they wanted to move away from it. So there's one reason to go across the sea. And then people, we think about, when the church didn't allow people to have their own Bible, that was a season in church. So there's these times when faith is struggling to be true faith. It's like when Jesus was talking about, who's my neighbor, and he's kind of putting everybody upside down, blessed are the poor and blessed are the meek, and you're trying to understand this. So at the end of the day, your question was, well, we have these different groups here. I think that those people who truly want to follow and obey Jesus Christ will find, common ground. And as I said, often is if the world continues to get to a place as it has in the past, when they herd all of the people who are people of faith into the same, camp, I hate to say concentration camp or something like that, you'll see that a lot of those issues don't matter. Now we're all brothers and sisters of Christ. And I think that we just have to be humble and prayerful about how we observe each other, because we will, God willing, all spend time together in eternity as brothers and sisters, So I've tended to be, much more open and understanding that I have Catholic brothers and sisters in faith, and we've got Orthodox ones, and we've got a lot of different people. We had that some people in America, Christians, would go, wow, they're really different, but they know Jesus. They have a faith, and they would look at us and go, wow, they're really different. I mean, so I'm saying these different, so I don't know if I'm answering the question very, very well, but so my hope would be that we are told to go out and share the gospel, share the good news. And some of us don't. We don't, we kind of live our own little thing. And I think that we do need to be people of faith that share our faith with others. And that's why I think that, and you talked about this camp meeting idea, Bible Cinema Roadshow is a camp meeting. And it's meant to bring people into, give them a tool where they can go out, bring them to something unique, and allow them then to basically be able to open the door for that conversation to bring people into a deeper relationship with the creator of the universe.
Tim Mahoney, thank you so much for your time. God of Heaven and Earth is in theaters November 5th and 6th. Go to godofheavenandearth.com to find listings where you can get your tickets and see the film. Where can we also find the film and other projects that you're working on via social media?
Okay, patternsofevidence.com. If people go to Patterns of Evidence, we have a number of films that we've made that are of this nature. They're going to be coming into the Bible Cinema Roadshow. And we also got a new movie that we're working on called The American Miracle. The American Miracle is coming out, and that is a film about God working in history as well, coming up in another year and a half or two. Thank you for having me, Robert. And if people want, like we said, they can go to Patterns of Evidence and they can sign up. We give weekly thinker updates on the Bible and archaeology and that type of thing.